Hi, my name is Gil Royal. I'm a retired engineer who earned his living with mathematics, but when retirement came, so did the interest in poetry. And it was something from way back. I was asked to write or to speak about why I write poetry. And the primary reason is I was raised by a mom who read poetry to me as a child. And her favorites, Wordsworth and Frost, began to work their magic in my young man and planted some seeds that waited until retirement to bloom. But then it began. One of the things I have discovered is that I have this need to be able to know what I think about something. I've also discovered that I have this really good knack of then saying it in exactly the wrong way. So I began to find myself on more occasions than I'd like, realizing I've offended somebody without even meaning to. And then while trying to recover from that moment, I lose the moment completely. And the message I'm trying to convey just gets lost right along with it. So what I have found is that if I write stuff down, it's a big help. That's why I wrote down what I'm saying today. Hopefully I'm following it. I like to write sonnets. The requirements for rhyming scheme, and meter can be quite challenging, but they're also rewarding when they're conquered. And what I find is that the constraints of some of the classical forms of poetry force me to carefully consider my words in a way that I neglect to do if I'm speaking aloud. There's also a sense of satisfaction from having written something that follows the style of one of the old masters. And with writing things and with writing poetry, sometimes it just sounds better than just saying it. Take, for instance, when Robert Frost was writing about birches, he wrote, "When I see birches bending left and right across the lines of straighter, darker trees, I like to think some boy's been swinging them. Swinging doesn't bend them down to stay. Ice storms do that." Now, he followed a very specific pattern in his writing, but it sounds so good, and it's easy to remember because of the style. Another example, I could tell somebody that I think they're pretty, but listen to the way William Shakespeare said it. "Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate." Well, that sounds a whole lot better than just saying, "Hey, you look good," or however you would say it. "Shall I compare thee to a summer's day?" And I found that the longer I write poetry and read poetry, the more I think in iambic pentameter primarily, and the more things begin to be written that way. Another reason I write poetry, the creative process can really be quite liberating. And I find that I will write about an issue that I probably would never bring up in a conversation. For instance, I've written poems about relationships and about intimacy that I wouldn't mind you reading, but I'd be reticent to discuss it personally. It's fun to let the imagination run wild sometimes. knowing that you have the opportunity to tame it before someone sees the final product. Another reason for writing poetry is a lot of times when you're talking, people are not listening to what you're saying, but they're thinking of how they're going to respond to what they're hearing. But I have found you can hand someone a poem, most of mine are short, and they'll stop and they'll read it with the deliberate intent of trying to understand what it says. That's a huge difference in my experience with poetry versus just talking about something. Also, I have found that sometimes folks are more interested in reading a short poem that you might hand them than they are in getting into a conversation that they have no idea how long it's going to last and how long they're going to be stuck there. One of the most rewarding things about poetry is the reaction of the reader when your point hits home. When they realize that you have taken the time to write a word of encouragement specifically about them. I write about faith, hope, love, hate, intimacy, and each character gives its own opportunities for times of expression. So what I would like to say to you is, you have something to say. Take your pen and your pencil and write it. It may just be exactly what someone else needs to hear.